All right, so we are live. I'm excited for this conversation. I have Wagner Ruiz, the founder of Ebanx. Wagner had a fun little pre-show right there. For people listening, you described Ebanx as a startup, which I don't know where the end of the startup line is, but you guys are certainly pushing the boundaries with over 1,000 employees. Where's Ebanks today as a company? And we'll talk about where you started it in the past down the road. But you guys have 1,000 employees. You focus on banking and payments infrastructure for South America. Are there other key parts of the business that are worth highlighting for people just to get a sense for what you're spending your time on?
It's good that you started with that because I was about to ask you which is the size of a startup. So I don't know as well. Uh, yes, we are now with more than 1,000 e-bankers, is how we call ourselves. Most of them here in Brazil. So we have around 800 people in Brazil, plus two to 300 outside Brazil in many countries. Ebanx is a payment company focused on cross-border commerce. So what we provide is cross-border payments. We are focused in Latin America, so now we are operating in 15 countries in the region. The idea was to cover all the region, so we are now into the Central America as well. And the main idea is to provide all the local payment methods for international companies. In the beginning of the company, I think the pitch was we would like to give the soft entry to the market. Because, to come to Brazil, to Mexico, to Chile, to Colombia with a company is not exactly simple. So the idea was to provide the local payment methods to give access to users and also to the merchants to this market. And we started the company in 2012, initially in Brazil. In 2014, we decided to expand to other countries. And now, almost 10 years later, we are finalizing 15 countries. It's a huge and very important thing for us, which is having the region as a whole. So this is what we do, payments. We have more than 150 payment methods. Of course, because of that, we started as a cross-border company, but now we are investing also in local payment methods. So local payments, as we call, is local sellers and local buyers, because the beginning was local international sellers and local buyers. This is the cross-border. Now we have also in a few countries like Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina, also the local payments, where we can serve local merchants selling to local users as well. This is the second. So we consider the cross-border the core business. We have now the local payments, and we have a few initiatives also for the consumer, for the end user. So we have Ebanx Go, which is an wallet with a card, very traditional, but we are trying to evolve or give more tools for the users to buy online. So it's not exactly online banking. This is not the goal. The goal is to be the partner of the user for online purchase globally. We started this project in Brazil, but we are doing now also, we will do in Mexico, also in Argentina, the two largest countries besides Brazil. So we are expanding to the region. And I think the goal is to cover the region on the cross-border, to have the local everywhere where we can, because of course you have small countries that is not worth to have the local payments, and use this end user solution for our customers, because we had more than 70 million users over the past 10 years buying through Ebanx. So we know what they want, and we are trying to offer something else to them. Of course, it's a different business, it's a different game, B2B and B2C, but we are trying to use in a model as Google did in the past. So concentrate 70% of our business in our core business, 20% in something very close, which is the local payments, and 10% we are trying to evolve and create always new things. I think this is where we are now.
Yeah, that's a really good summary. Underneath the hood, say more technically speaking, when someone describes what a cross-border payment company does, tell me how accurate this is. So I think of it as you're maintaining a database, maybe a ledger of account balances of each transaction. So you're saying, say there's a local payment provider in the country, you're connecting with them and saying, hey, we'll receive your API endpoint so that when a user wants to send money, you can hit us. And then will you guys maintain a bank account that's kind of the float where you're receiving money into the account and then you're sending money out, and your software keeps track of the statuses of the inbound payments and outbound? Just to wrap my head around it, is that kind of what's happening behind the scenes on cross-border payments?
It's cool to talk to someone that knows how things work. You are right, and I will give you the background on that. So, as we started as cross-border, the cross-border is very simple. So, we act as a merchant of record. We receive all the funds and we settle to the merchant through our settlement company in Singapore. We settle to the merchant. So, we have all the conciliation for all the payment methods. For each real or pesos that we receive, this is marked. We collect everything and then we send to our settlement company to do the settlement. When the next step was to add countries, so we started in Brazil doing that. Then you have Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Peru, all the countries using the same methodology. So I am collecting locally everything and then I settle. And all the money and all the transaction are traceable. So everything because of the conciliation. When we started the local payment methods, it's pretty much the same, right? So locally. But the big change that we did, I don't know, 1 year ago, was to create Ebanx One. So Ebanx One is our unique platform. So in this platform, you can use multiple business models. So you can have an Uber, for instance, working for us, with us in Argentina as a local and in Mexico as a cross-border. Everything inside one platform, everything traceable. So since the payment is initiated, we can trace everything. And the settlement, then you have two options. So if a local transaction, I can settle locally to their entity locally. Or they keep the business model as a cross-border and I will settle to their country, whatever they are. And we do that in a centralized way when it's cross-border. So another merchant, they can have 3, 4, 5 countries working with us. They will receive everything in USD through Singapore because we collect, send the money. This was another advantage in the past because, as you probably know, the currency is a problem in the region. So something very important specifically for enterprise business is we don't want to have the risk. So collect, send right away, keep in USD and pay us. So this is more or less how we do. On the back end is exactly as an acquiring for credit cards. So I can, of course, we do credit cards in all countries, but we have other payment methods. We have all the alternative payment methods, as we call. And that is a little bit different, the conciliation for each one. Probably you know as well that there is no something unified for the region and countries. Each country here is in one step on the evolution for payments. So what we do, we collect everything, we put in the same language for the conciliation. So if you are doing OXXO in Mexico or boleto bancário in Brazil, different payment methods, but the same idea. You, as a company, we will look into that as a card transaction because you have the trail for everything. I'm not sure if I
Yeah. No, that's a good answer. I think of it almost conceptually as a hub and spoke. So you guys would be in the middle, and then everyone else connects into you. So you're getting money in, you're reconciling it, you're recording it on a ledger or database, and then sending it out and sending people the statuses of that transaction. How are things done before you started in 2012? You're sitting around the table, you're looking for your next idea. Like, how were things back then, to give a sense for how things have changed?
Funny thing, because why we started and which problem we decided to solve at the time, and how things started. It's funny because everything started with a friend. Because myself and Alfonso and João, we knew and we had other business. So a friend of ours outside Brazil, willing to sell to Brazilians, started a website trying to sell to Brazilians. And one day he called us and asked, guys, what is boleto bancário? Because everybody is asking for that, and I don't have that. I have only credit cards. And more, my approval rate for credit cards is terrible. Is around 22 to 30%. So this was the problem. And not only in Brazil, in all countries, because we have so many different things here, like a domestic use card. I'm not sure if you know that. In Brazil, we have credit cards that are allowed just for local domestic transactions. How this guy can buy abroad. That's why the conversion rate the approval rate was so low. So this was the scenario. And then what we decide to do with that? Guys, let's find a way to solve that. So the whole idea of Ebanx came from that. One problem that we saw from the merchant, in this case, but also for the user, because the user, they were willing to buy. And then we decided to create a structure. Took us 1 year because another, I'm not sure problem, but another specific thing from the Brazilian and the region is the regulation. So regulation is evolving as well since 2012. So we had to find the right business model to do that, to collect locally and to send the money abroad in a legal and regular way. So this was how Ebanx started. Even in Mexico, 3 years later, I remember that I was in a Money 2020 with a very big merchant, American merchant, and he told me, Wagner, I have the same problem in Mexico, only 22% of approval rate. Try to solve that. And he was the reason for us to start our expansion. I took a plane to Mexico, we spent 9 months, and we create the same business model. Of course, with slight differences between countries because of the regulations. But in general lines, all the countries, we saw that, all the countries, they had similar problems, not exactly the same, but the approval rates, the access, even the alternative payment methods. In countries like Chile, it's okay, the card industry. But in Peru, it's very tough. Lots of alternative payment methods. And these guys, how to connect a Baloto, for instance, with, I don't know, an international merchant. That's why we started. And even our first big merchant, which was Alibaba, AliExpress, everything started the same way. Because the funny thing is, they came after us. Why? Because they were selling to Brazilians just with international credit cards. And then people started to ask about boleto bancário. What is it? What is boleto bancário? Why you do not accept boleto bancário? And they Google boleto bancário Brazil. And we own the domain boletobancario.com. So they saw us and they contacted us because of this site, a project that we started, another partner started in, 2002. He bought the domain. And even Alibaba started this way. They came after us asking for a solution for boleto bancário, the alternative payment method in Brazil. And then we started to do credit cards as well. Today, we offer to the merchant like 95% of approval rates, which for international transaction was at least not usual in Brazil and in the region.
Wow. So is that to say only 20% when you started, 20 to 30% of the time, if I tried to purchase something on a merchant's website that was in another country, it would be approved only 20 to 30% of the time, and the rest of the time it would be rejected? Even for credit cards? Why would credit cards be rejected so often? Are they?
We have two things. One thing is the domestic card use only. So if you have people, because credit card is different from US, right? In Brazil, it's very attached to the credit to the people. So it's not usual. The credit here is so slow in the region, not only in Brazil. They created this domestic use credit card. So you can use that only in Brazil. You cannot buy abroad because there is no need. So this card cannot be used to buy abroad at the time. And also you have the fraud, because we have in Brazil and all the region concentration in banks, right? So you have lots of issuers here, but 80% it's in 4 issuers. And they are very traditional, or at least they were in the past, with fraud. And the levels for fraud in international transactions in the region was very big. So this is another reason for the banks, the traditional banks, to close or to deny transactions in our international website. It's getting better and better, but this was the problem in 2012. Plus, lots of people without credit card, any credit card. So these people, and I have another funny thing to tell you. In my building, in my home, in 2012, I had a guy from the security, and we spoke a lot. And one time he asked me, "Can I borrow your credit card to buy something?" 3 months later, I don't know how he knew about that, but he came to talk to me about Ebanx because we were working for AliExpress at the time. And he told me, "I don't need the credit card anymore because now I can pay with Boleto." So we gave lots of access also to the people without credit cards.
Right.
So this is where, because of that, you had so low approval rates in transactions.
Yeah. And it makes sense too, because prior to 2000, say 10, 9, even like early 2000s, there probably wasn't a big demand from consumers to businesses on making cross-border payments. I'm sure there was B2B transactions behind the scenes because businesses would source different products from different places. That's been going on for a long time. But the internet, making products online, allows people to purchase things in different areas where maybe that problem wasn't that big previous. And so the internet comes around. Now everyone wants to buy and sell everywhere. And all of a sudden everyone has their local payment provider. And now it's really hard. So it's like the internet is the on-ramp, so to speak, for this, right?
Yes. So first the internet, and then the problem was the payment. And the third problem always is the for physical goods, how to send the goods. So it's the third problem for the companies. But yes, I think we created the solution, and because of the solution, plus of course this is internet merit. Because of the internet, people is a new market, cross-border commerce. Specifically for this region, it's a new market. But there is another funny thing in Brazil, also in Mexico and Argentina. Even when I was a kid, we had an access to good products here locally. So people with money at the time, they used to fly to Miami and come back with ovens, with TVs, with everything. So it's almost cultural to have access to this kind of products. Of course, our industry now is much better. The importation is better. But even though with this improvement, there is a need for other products in quality and also in price, because Brazil is not exactly cheap. It is for people making money in USD, but for the local reality, it's not exactly cheap. So that's why we had three phenomena. The first one was AliExpress, amazing. The second one to enjoy the same kind of phenomenon was Wish, founded in the US from by a Chinese guy, and the third one now is Shopee. So lots of access to new products and also to better cost. I think we had a good 10 years of improvements in payments, in companies, and of course everything by the digitalization and the internet.
And what do you, in your opinion, what do you think is the biggest hindrance or friction point, blocker maybe, for acceleration on those two things? Having better products at cheaper price for people. It probably varies by country in Latin America, but say maybe take Brazil if there is a big variance. Is it access to? Is it the banking regulations? Is it the way that the payments industry is set up, or are there other regulations or other blockers that if you could wave a magic wand and change the way that the system is structured in some way, do you see things that are really inefficient behind the scenes?
So many things. For the business itself, the worst problem that we have today, I think, is the shipment. So if you are a company selling goods, the shipment to the region is not exactly easy. It's much more easier than in the past, but still we have problems to ship things from China, from the US to Brazil, the timeline to deliver. So this is a science, and it's very hard for you to solve 15 countries at once, because each country here is one different country. And this is another mistake that people from outside the region, they usually think. No, we have two differences: Brazil speaking Portuguese and the rest of the countries speaking Spanish. First mistake, each Spanish language country in the region is different, completely different in tax regimes, in regulation for payments, in everything. And even the culture is so different that for you to start to take your company and go after these 15 countries, as we did, probably will take the same time, 10 years to do the same. So what we are giving to the merchant, guys, we did that already, so come with us and just plug in.
Yeah.
But I think regulation for payments and for tax is always a complicator. So we have 10 years in experience doing that. So even the regulation in Mexico, you can say that was similar to Brazil, but there is so many different things, like how the card processing happens in Mexico is completely different from Brazil, which is now completely different from Chile with just one acquirer, or Colombia opening the market. So the old structure for card schemes, it's one thing, very hard. Regulations changing every day for tax and payments is another thing that is very hard. And on the business side, I think we still have problems on the shipment. But what we try to do as company here, to serve and to provide the solution for payments, regulation, and tax. And we are always trying to help on the shipment. For digital goods, you don't have this problem. So for digital goods, is very seamless solution in very. That's why PlayStation, for instance, Sony or Spotify, they do so well. And if you think about Spotify, and I had a conversation with them, I don't know, 5 years ago, and one of the guys, they told me, Wagner, if I need to open an office for each country to grow my business, I will have a problem. So I cannot handle that. They have, 200 countries, and they need to do that in a fast way. So solutions like Ebanx is a way to solve this problem.
Yeah. To open up an office in every country that a software provider is in is not feasible. So
Not
that
feasible.
makes a lot of sense. Uh, when you started off, you have three founders. Obviously, the regulations may be somewhat public, but the way that the banking systems are set up and the payment systems, I find that they're just complicated and they're not transparent. Did you, or what was the composition of the founding team where you had enough insight to dive into this? I mean, you started off as a chief revenue or chief financial officer. At least
Yes.
as in early days, you're, I'm sure, doing everything, but you probably split it up where you're overseeing the financial component. How did you guys split up the, at least in the early days, split up the responsibility?
I think we had a very good level of complementarity between us. So Alfonso was always the commercial guy. He's a lawyer by training, so he had these connections and did lots of business outside Brazil. So the commercial side was always Alfonso. João was his background is tech, so everything that we had or we have now started with him. That now is our CEO, and I was the CFO because I came from the banking and FX operation. So I handled operations and finance, including regulatory and everything. So it was very complementary between the three of us. And I remember selling Ebanx for the first time. Alfonso was the one dealing with the merchant, but the merchant was always willing to talk to me to be sure that they would receive their money, which is the most important, and also have all the features. So they wanted to talk to João. Okay, we need this API. And of course, myself and Alfonso, we said, no, we already have this API. And João was the one going after this during the night to be ready for the next day to offer the API. So this was how we started. Very clear, myself with finance, regulatory, and business model, João with technology and all the systems that we have, and Alfonso opening and keeping door opens for Ebanx. This was how we started. Now, I think we have everybody with the same DNA, which is another hard thing to keep in the company. But our thing always was to serve the merchant. So that's why we are so specialized on enterprise business, because we did lots of things for big merchants like Alibaba or Airbnb or Spotify or Sony, because they always wanted or want something different. And our role always was, okay, we will solve that. In the end of the day, 10 years later, I think we were the winners as well, because our company became much, much better because of their demands. And they had the most crazy demands in terms of features and timeline to achieve. So I think we are better because of our merchants as well.
Yeah. Well, of course, I'm sure that they push you to build the things that are the highest priority for them, which in turn are the things that would be the best things for you to build because other merchants would want those things. Yeah, I think listening to customers, it sounds cliche in startups, but listening to what your customers want is pretty underrated. A lot of people will just build whatever they think they should build. On the split of the founders, I'm familiar with the business side of startups, familiar with the tech side. Your side fascinates me because to me it's very much like a black box on how the payments infrastructure works behind the scenes. The regulatory landscape is also complicated. I'm curious on the dynamics of the different countries. So you mentioned language with Portuguese for Spanish. What countries, if you were to sort of say an example of what is working better or working worse, and I'll let you think of how you want to define better or worse. But are there ways that you can even objectively say some countries are doing it better and the patterns of what better means, either in regulation or maybe the way that the banking infrastructure decided to roll out with how concentrated it was or unconcentrated? I mean, what countries seem to be accelerating and which countries seem to not be? And I'm curious if there's why. Because we work a lot with Argentina, and Argentina has, there may be other countries as well, but I'm familiar with Argentina's currency problem. Their currency is just constantly becoming inflated, and it's like you can have everything else right, but if you can't get that right, it makes it really difficult to exchange in international commerce. People don't want to hold their own currency. Yeah, I'm curious your reaction to all that.
No, it's funny. I will try to be because I am Brazilian, so it's very funny. Once you understand the logic between the mindset of the regulator, and there is a logic, it's much more clear to understand where you are going. So, of course, we have the regulation problem, and we have difference between countries. Usually, I don't want to offend other countries, but you can put in a map nowadays and say Brazil, it's 5 years ahead of Mexico in terms of regulation, 10 years ahead of Chile, 3 years ahead of Colombia, for instance. But why? Because Brazil started in 2012 a huge change in the regulation, and they are moving very fast. So we have changes for better every week here. But what you can see is other countries, they are doing exactly the same in different moments, but they are doing exactly the same. And then you have specific things, but small things or big things are very common. You always had banking concentration and monopoly or duopoly in card processing in all the countries. So you don't have that anymore in Brazil, and I believe we were the first ones. In Mexico, you have different things like, even if you have Visa and Master, the power for card processing belongs to the banking, because there you have the switches. We don't have the switches in Brazil. We have, of course, because there is switch, but it belongs to the acquirer. It's different. There you have two major entities, but the spirit is the same. So even for payments institution, something that started probably in the UK first, and then in the US you have problems with the states, but the idea probably started in the UK. Nowadays you have the same language or idea from about where they are going is the same. So it's just a difference between timelines in the regulation. When we started was somehow a nightmare, specifically the FX, which for countries like Brazil and Argentina, it's a tough issue. So we had to be very close to financial institutions, to the regulator. And believe me, even this regulation is changing every week. But if you understand what the regulator wants, which is some control over the currency, but more than that, the traceable information about everything, which makes sense on AML and everything, it's much more easier for you to deal with them. So a little bit of it is a black box, or it was, now it is not in Brazil. But if you can get the logic behind that, it's much more easier. And you need to respect all the regulators. So even in Mexico, we keep talking to them to understand what they want and how we should do that. Even in Argentina, just you mentioned, Argentina is a little bit worse because it's not a regulation on payments. Of course, they also have that, but they have political and economic problems for the past 25 years. So every time they change a president, the currency is a problem. They try to stop the flow from Argentina to outside, because the natural path from Argentinians is to take the money out. So they need to stop. But not for purchases. So if you can have a dialogue with the regulator and understand exactly what they need. I think we had and we have some experience trying to attend and to serve also the regulator, because one thing that we decide since the beginning is you cannot fight
Yeah.
with the big players, and but not even with the regulator. So we need to work together. And Brazil is a huge example that we now see all the countries following.
That makes a lot of sense because regulators, really, a regulator is a arm of the government, and the government realizes that the currency is a major it's a major arm of the government. It's a major leverage point because governments collect taxes and then they spend money on services, goods and services that benefit the society. That's what a government does at a high level. And so if they don't have control over where the money's flowing, then there's a risk that people won't pay taxes. And when they don't pay taxes, then the governments start to dissolve. I would imagine that's the central theme of why they want control. I want to ask you if that is the trend, and that makes sense. Do you see trends of governments becoming resistant to crypto and blockchain? I'm curious how you've seen, given that you talk to a lot of these folks, what the general attitude is today and maybe where it's trending on crypto.
This is very cool, and this is a way to see how regulators are changing. Not perhaps not how they think, but how they act. And the one funny thing, I think in 2013, I saw a presentation from the New York Fed president, director, I don't know. And he was a crypto fan. And I saw one phrase which was, we like technology, innovation, and we will support that. However, if costs identification of the sender and the receiver of the money, this is a problem and we will not accept that. And this is somehow the mindset of all regulators. And let's be honest, I cannot say they are completely wrong on that. So the first impact in all regulators, even in Brazil, in other countries of the region, I don't know, 5-10 years, was to say no, 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 no. But now, as we can see, is everywhere. And now, what I feel from them, they are trying to be ahead of the game on that. So there is lots of regulators trying to create their own crypto, using the system, trying to be involved in the system. Even Brazil now, the regulator itself might not like of everybody that is doing crypto, but we have a clear not regulation, but yes, regulation. It's not a currency, but is an asset here in Brazil. So you can negotiate. So we see some improvements and the mindset of the regulator changing a little bit, try to be more, of course, with the country, because they, as you said, it's important for the country, but trying to work together. So in Brazil, in all countries, other countries here, I can feel that. Still, for the traditional regulator, they say no, but now in more advanced regulations, what you can see is, okay, let's do that. So that's why you have probably the Brazilian digital currency in the future. That's why in all discussions with the central bank, they cover at least this subject. So they are trying to do that. I'm not sure if it's because they just want, or because now they see that probably there is no way. So it's better to have everybody on board and doing how they believe this is the word. So having the track of the transaction, it's important. I know that be anonymous is something important for some people, but it's not possible for a country or a regulator to say, no, I am okay with that. So they will go after that. And but I think they are trying. This is my point. At this
Yeah.
moment,
It seems like like if I'm putting myself in the shoes of a government regulator, I'm thinking that there's a balancing act here. On one side, you can't just close down crypto, because if you do, there is an incredible amount of innovation and benefit to your citizens that won't be accessible if you just say no, we're not going to allow it. And the risk where that comes back to you, or to me in this case, is people are going to recognize this and they're going to protest. And then you're going to have a lot of tension between the people and the government, because people will want the benefits of it and the government's blocking it. So now the government is going to, revolutions would start and flip on this theory. I think the other side of it is control. I think of it as controlling taxes, and maybe it's security as well. But part of it may just be governments figuring out how do we operate in a new, with a completely new framework in currency. So how do we say we're going to do taxes? We're going to prevent maybe money transacting in ways that it shouldn't be, either for illegal purposes or security purposes. But generally, if you're not adopting this new way of transacting peer-to-peer on crypto, then like I think governments face revolutions. I think this is the kind of thing that if one country said, no, we're not going to allow it at all, and the rest of the world advances, people are going to overthrow. And I see that as the bounds. I'm curious how you react to that, if that makes sense.
no, I think this is perfect. This is exactly what it is. There is some tension between both sides, but it's very clear what one side wants and what another side wants. And it's very clear where is the power to do that as a country. But the good point here is I can feel the regulators trying at least to be clever and trying to get that to meet in the middle. If you asked me, I don't know, 7 years ago about Brazil, I would say forget about crypto, knowing the regulator. But now I see lots of efforts, including on the FX side of the regulator. In Brazil, what they are talking about, I'm not sure if you know, we have now PIX, which is our instant payment, powered by the central bank. And the next step, probably next year, and their dream and goal is to have the international PIX. So they want to be able to send peer-to-peer transaction between central banks in an instant way. This is a huge, in mindset, is a huge advance for the region. It's 20 years ago in these countries, the only way to buy currency was to go to a guy that you don't know exactly the origin to get cash. This was where we were 20 years ago. And now you see all the regulators trying to regulate, of course, this is their role, the crypto, and also trying to create and do new things. But of course there is, and we need to meet in the halfway, because we need to understand as well that a transaction completely anonymous might be a risk for other things. So it's understandable their concern. Mm-hmm. We just need to find. My point here is, I can feel not only in Brazil but in at least 3 to 4 countries here, they are trying to do that and be ahead of the game. And I think we will have, and that's why everybody's talking about a real currency as crypto for the country. So probably this will be the way for them to be involved, perhaps.
Yeah. It seems pretty inevitable, right? It seems like that the current fiat system of printing money out, issuing coins and paper to people, and even distributing it through a central bank is slow, and it comes with a lot of downsides compared to crypto. Is this affecting you guys in terms of allowing you to open up new product lines that are built on crypto? Or I'm sure there's some competitive threat maybe to the international exchanges. I'm curious how, like, putting on the Ebanx hat for a second, is it, how does crypto sort of line up?
I think as individuals entrepreneurs, we like the subject, and we keep following the developments. Still today, within Ebanx, we don't do crypto, much more because of this perception of the regulator. So we decide
Mm.
to keep what we decide to do exactly was to adjust our systems to the current systems very well known to the banks,
Mm.
to the central bank, and to the regulator. So if you see, in the end of the day, I am consolidating everything that we have and had, even PIX. We have lots of volumes with PIX now in Brazil. So we are trying to consolidate. On the side of crypto, we have our personal endeavors on that because we are a fan. But for Ebanks, we are just waiting for the regulations where it's possible, and
Yeah.
once it's possible, we will do as well as a payment method.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good way to think about it. Yeah. You don't want to build too quickly because then you'll have to change and pivot, and that'll be frustrating. Last thing I want to ask you is, you guys announced a large round recently, a few months ago, I think. And how does the company currently look at funding? I know there was some news. I didn't read too much in detail about going public. Are there different? Does the U.S. market influence access to capital in a big way, or does Brazil have their own market where you're currently public or would go public? I'm curious how you would think about transitioning the company from private, where you're raising money through institution or VC, to going public, and when you even just have that conversation amongst the founders, what drives a need to do that, if that is the current trajectory in place?
Probably it's not as I will try to tell more, not only the answer, because every step in our lives as a company was very meaningful. So we had one very good thing because as we were generating cash flow, even the first investment from a VC, from FTV, was just in 2017. And why was we did that? What was the reason? The reason was we were growing, facing lots of challenges. Cash was one of the problems, but was not exactly the main problem. What we were looking was a big brother to help us in business outside Brazil, in strategy. So it was a very happy marriage. When we did the second round in 2019, was very important for us to give a stamp, to become a unicorn. I know that in the US it's not so relevant, but in the region, and for us, for our employees, for everybody, to reach $1 billion valuation in 2019 was very important for us. And then the third step, which was the Advent investment, probably 3 months ago, was also a major step. And what we tried to achieve was, besides FTV, which is a huge partner, to have one of the largest investment funds in payments, to see, to give us an stamp as well about what we did for the past 10 years. So it's very gratificating to see that. So we had due diligence, everything. So they are on board with us. This is a changing in the company. Of course, the size of the check was very important. Give us lots of opportunities and M&A that we are working, and made us to achieve this level where we believe we are prepared to the next chapter, which probably I'm not sure in a X time to become a public company. And to become a public company, we have space in Brazil. Brazil, of course, is not so big and liquid as the US. For our company, probably makes more sense US because we are now half Brazilian, but half of more than half, I think, of our revenues come from outside Brazil. So we are now, we can consider ourselves a global company. So looks to me that makes sense, the US market. But I think these steps were very important for us. Even the first, and we had, I'm not sure if startups will hear that, but we had a bet between the three of us since the day one. And our analysis was how much in TPV we will have to need a big brother. So in the beginning, now, if we have 50 million USD in TPV, we need some help. The last time we spoke was, I don't know, 100 million TPV. And the first deal came with 350. If even not needing the money itself, but bringing a new partner. So
TPV TPV is top line, what is TPV?
Total process volume.
Total process. Okay, got it.
We had a chart in my room saying up to here we can do it by ourselves. Here we need a help. I remember one conversation that I have with a huge bank in Brazil in 2013, suffering lots of pressure from everybody. And I met the president of the bank here in Brazil, and he asked me, okay, what do you want? And my answer at the time was, I want to give you 10% of my company just to have you in my cap table to help me. Of course, was a joke, not too much for me, but he considered it as a joke. And our joke nowadays is he should accept it, had accepted.
Yeah, well, in hindsight, 2020. Yeah.
So I think this is the plan and the path. But the plan here is to grow. So that's why we are keeping adding countries. We are keeping adding payment processing methods. We are adding new business like local and consumer. So probably you hear more news about us in the near future.
Yeah. I really like the business model because you're kind of cleaning up all the local payment processors, but you're making it, you're providing order to all of it. You're organizing. Your playbook is, in my view, at least the 70% of the business is relatively straightforward. We're just, okay, we got to organize and integrate with all these different payment processors. And I'm sure behind the scenes, you have a process for doing that and how you screen it, technically integrate it. And every one adds value on top of the previous one. It's like the network effects are pretty enticing.
It is. We are trying to we believe that we can start using third players, but in the end of the day, we need to control our rails. So that's why we bought a payment institution in Brazil. We invested in a bank in Brazil. We are looking into other regulated entities. We have an EMI in the UK. We have a SVF in Singapore. So we believe that if we own the rails, we can improve even now. Remember, in 2012, we were talking about 22% in approval rate, and now we are talking about 90, 95. But now the challenge is to move from 92 to 93 to 94, and this is where we are. And we believe that if we own at least the important part of the chain is important as well. This is where we are nowadays.
Awesome. Fascinating business. And I really appreciate your background too. Coming at it from the banking and legal regulatory side of it, to me, is always the most interesting because it's so influential, but so difficult to really understand what's going on. So we have a lot of startup founders that listen to the show and people interested in payments. So I hope that this was educational for them as it was for me. So Wagner, thanks so much for jumping on today, and congrats on all your progress.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
All right, man. We'll hope to have you back on one day.
Hopefully.
All right.